Good morning. Andrew Nemr's here for a 2-day residency. At the end of chapel, you're going to see a slide up on the board that has all the different events that he'll be doing, and it's a lot of events. I want to bring your attention to one thing in particular, which might be a bit of a surprise. At 7 o'clock tonight, he's going to be talking about the joys and challenges of entrepreneurship. But when you make a living off of being a tap dancer, when you're both the product and the management, this is indeed one great practice of entrepreneurship. I encourage you to come out if you're interested in being an entrepreneur at all. There's definitely a lot you'll learn from that time with Andrew. I met Andrew when we were both part of Redeemer Presbyterian's Gospel and Culture Conference in New York City in November 2012. After the conference was over, all the speakers were having dinner. Andrew and I were having a marvelous conversation. And in this conversation, I learned that he had been a TED Fellow. In fact, he is a TED Fellow. And then he told me about this TED Talk that he did where he was talking about his life story while tap dancing. And I thought, well, now that might be something really interesting to have at Wheaton College. And the day has come. So please join me in welcoming my friend, Andrew Nemr.
Good morning. All right. So, thanks. So I was preparing some words to share with you last week, and I realized I ran the risk of using my entire time to set up the context for what I actually wanted to talk about today. I'd spend the whole time telling you about how, as a 3.5-year-old, my parents, recent immigrants from Lebanon, and me had no idea what the future held when I first signed up for tap dance class. Tap dance class at 3.5 looked something like this. Trying to get all three. I'd tell you about how meeting Gregory Hines and Savion Glover working with them, befriending them, and having them as my mentors was definitely not in the plan. And even when it became a thought, it still happened earlier than anybody expected. I tell you about how being entrusted with a legacy of a dance form that's neither codified nor documented in any true sense of the word is not something that I anticipated nor really wanted when I first simply fell in love with tap dancing. I would be telling you about dreams fulfilled, meeting my tap dance heroes, dancers who were in their prime in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, the cats who had the secrets, being able to create work for other tap dancers, produce, present in New York City. And if you've heard, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, it's pretty true. And I'd be telling you about dreams deferred and some completely broken. Watching my mentors pass on one by one, being rejected by community on account of age and race, and failing time and time again to bring the images and the sounds in my imagination to the stage. But I don't want to talk about any of that. What I do want to talk about is a list. And this is a list that I used to write quite often in my formative years. The impetus for writing this list used to be really strong during times of overwork and high stress. And I'm assuming you guys can relate to those times. For me, as a full-time student and a full-time tap dancer, this idea of burnout used to cycle around about every 6 months. So there you have this list scattered through all my journals. List used to have a heading. The heading would be something like, "Who am I?" Or more ominously, "The list." And it used to have, from top to bottom, these monikers of identity, listed by strength of perceived association. It would say Christian, Lebanese, Canadian, American, tap dancer. So if we look at it generally, I was attempting to figure out who I was in the categories of faith, culture, and work. So let's look at this list a little more intricately. Christian. I grew up in a Christian household. My parents made a public promise to raise me in the faith, so I was dedicated as a child. And my folks came through. My familial culture included Christ, prayer, and a visible, applied walk of faith. I myself gave my heart to Christ when I was 9. Small church in Northern Virginia, called to faith by the pastor on a service Christmas Eve. So by the time I started writing my list, I figured I was in the fold. And as such, I didn't do much academic work. When it came down to faith. The cultural monikers function similarly. I didn't think I could do any more or less to be Lebanese, especially by lineage. My folks took care of that. I was born in Canada, so that took care, thank you. So that took care of that. And just in case anybody doubted, I took up ice hockey. And I lasted 3 weeks. In terms of American, grew up here. Been living in the country since I was 3. Grew up in, around, engaged with, and responding to the American culture for the majority of my life. So that brings us to tap dancing. So my relationship with tap dancing started inconspicuously enough as a 3.5-year-old only child who needed a social activity. My folks sat me around the dining room table and said, what do you think? And I, as a 3.5-year-old, said, I don't know, but I'll try. With undying love for my parents, early opportunities for achievement, and success in those achievements, by the time I started writing my list, I had come to the understanding that not only did I want to be a tap dancer, I was supposed to be a tap dancer. And so I made very specific choices with regards to the music that I listened to, with regards to the physical practice I put my body and my mind through, and even with regards to the pursuit of this idea of improvisation that I'm currently engaged with you here now. All those things were tangible evidence of my identity as a tap dancer. And for me, they came on as an outgrowth of this fundamental understanding and desire in my heart that this is something that not only did I want to do, I was supposed to be doing it. As far as I was concerned, I was already everything else on this list. Tap dancing needed some work. Bless you. Thank you. And although challenges abounded with regards to this work, the process seemed pretty clear. This was my calling, so I was supposed to put all my strength and all my focus into being exactly like the most well-recognized tap dancers in the world, if not better than them. Now, by the time I was writing my list, I knew those guys. So this goal didn't seem so far-fetched. And besides, we as Christians are called to perfection. So that was my goal, to be the perfect tap dancer. So writing my list seemed harmless enough. That is, attempting to articulate from where I derived my own identity. But there was a problem that gradually kind of snuck its way in. And that is, for all my thought about identity, I put very little thought into where I derived my value. That is, what was the system of measurement by which I came to understand the love that I had received as a child of God? I'd been blessed early and often. I had a loving set of parents. Any need that I had was always fulfilled. And I had a slew of early successes. But I came to desire a continued slew of successes in order for me to understand and measure up God's love in my life. And this happened without me even really knowing it. So my life looked something like this. If I received an expected success, I counted myself the beneficiary of God's love. I'd be joyful, and all that extra energy I'd pour back into my work. However, if I was denied an expected success, I considered myself having been denied God's love. I'd get angry, often seeking blame, even if that blame fell on my own shoulders. And I suffered bouts of depression. My only solace was my work. I poured myself back in, trying to do better, be better, in search of even the smallest achievement that I could hang my hat on and point to it and say, that's a sign of God's love. I lived this way for 15 years. Often wondering what exactly wasn't working. But I wasn't quite able to articulate it ever. The emotional roller coaster that I had put myself on was intense. Again, if I received something, I'd get the highest high. Assurance that God loved me. If I didn't receive something, even a hiccup in an ongoing project that I thought was blessed, I'd receive the most daunting doubt. Did God still love me? I had built a context for my entire life in which I could not live without achievement because I could not live without God's love. And then it happened. Within a 2-year period, I went from directing a full-time dance company that was fully funded. I was on salary, we had commercial representation, and a touring contract. And to be on salary as a tap dancer is unheard of. Truly. So I went from all that to personal bankruptcy, the risk of losing my dance company, no salary, and sleeping on the living room floor of my house because of a major strain in my back. Be still and know that I am God. My dad lost his job during the same time period. I sat still, and I read Job in one sitting. There was tension everywhere. And so there I was, on the floor in the living room, attempting to fall asleep but having Christian television on the TV, as one does during times like this. And a pretty well-known television pastor comes on and says, "Are you suffering from an emotional roller coaster because of your work?" Really? Do you have sporadic successes with extremely high highs and deep failures? Nothing's consistent? I'm saying, yes, of course. He said, well, that's because you haven't given up your work to God. And I mean all of it. So right away, I went to prayer. And I asked God to take away anything that I thought I hadn't already given. And just to be sure, to not leave anything in my possession, or even within grabbing distance. Within a year, I was brought to my current home church. I was baptized, and I entered into a faith and work integration program, which kind of functions like AA for high-achieving Christians. I would receive my TED fellowship, and not only would I be allowed to keep my dance company, but I would see it flourish. Indeed, me standing on this stage today in front of you, speaking as a tap dancer, is a testimony to God's grace. The story is ongoing, thank God. But there are a few key areas in terms of my confusion that, having gone through it, having had some time to reflect, I'd like to share with you today. Finally, what I wanted to talk about. The first is provision. So I thought I had to rely. Tap dancers can speak. I thought, growing up as a tap dancer, everybody used to say, your feet tell stories. You speak with your feet. Finally, I have to actually speak with my mouth. Oh man, the adjustments. Okay, so. Provision. I thought I had to rely on my own work for provision. Makes sense. If I don't work, who's going to provide for me? And in the context of a personal bankruptcy, that question looms like a dark cloud over one's head. However, I have finally come to the understanding that provision does not come from work. A farmer cannot make the ground grow a good crop. A fisherman cannot make fish swim into his net. And not even a salesman can make a customer buy. No, all provision comes from God. And Christ said, consider the fowls in the air. They neither sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet our Heavenly Father feeds them. Are we not much better than they? Work is a discipline, and a good one, but it has no guaranteed outcome. Provision is a gift. It's a gift from God. And for me, in my times of confusion, as I was writing my list and beyond, I should have had my focus on the provider and his righteousness, not my work. The second area is purpose. I thought tap dancing was my calling, and it seemed like a valiant calling. Tap dancing has many times been considered a dying art form. In many circumstances, I was the first live/living tap dancer that many people saw. So I considered myself saving an art form. It's a nice badge to wear. Additionally, there was an entire generation of dancers, those whom I knew, hip in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, that when they saw me dance, I felt like I was reconciling their life. Because they had committed their life to an art form that they lived in the fear of it disappearing. Badge number 2. So when somebody asked me, well, what do you do? I'm a tap dancer. Every chance I had on a form to list my occupation, tap dancer, capital T, capital D. When asked what occupies my time, tap dancing, choreographing, presenting, producing. I would think about my audience, I would think about my mentors. And all those things seem right and good within the context of work. But within the context of life, how distant was I from the simplest of commands? When Christ was asked, what is first among all the commandments? He said, Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second, like the first, was love thy neighbor as thy friend. Nowhere in those two commandments does it explicitly say to do good work, or create beautiful art, or to have successful businesses. It says love. That's it. And that should have been what occupied the majority of my time. In fact, the occupation and preoccupation with these two commandments is what has most recently changed my heart and colored my choices, in the hopes that my purpose will never again be questioned. My work is love. And so lastly, we come to identity and value. And as we've seen, I was blessed often and early, and came to rely on those blessings as the sole measurement of God's love. Life in and of itself wasn't enough. No, I needed continual assurance, a sign. But only a wicked generation desires a sign. In truth, whatever we talk about, whether it's the lack of worry for provision, or the understanding of a fundamental identity, we have to be assured, or fundamental purpose rather, we have to be assured of where we stand. And so the question is, how do we know? Sorry if my feet smell. Well, the fruits of the Spirit, as described in Galatians, can help. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, goodness, gentleness, faith, meekness, temperance. They can provide proof. Personal prayer can provide assurance. But in fact, God, through Jesus Christ, has already accounted for his own. I, by grace, was made aware of his existence. By grace, my heart broke at the sight of Christ on the cross. By grace, my heart rejoiced with wonder at the sight of the empty tomb. And by grace, he met me exactly where I was, on the floor of that living room, even if he was the one who put me there in the first place. And in fact, wherever we are, he comes and meets us with a hope that's rooted in the greatest love known to man. He offers everything so that he might allow our hearts to soften and a path to come to him in love, by love, and for love. I stand before you a child of God, by faith in Jesus Christ, in whose work on the cross I'm granted forgiveness and fully grafted in, justified by grace. And there is no amount of tap dancing that can change that fact. I have little want. I have the least worry for provision that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I know my fundamental purpose. I know who I am. And I pray the same for all those of us who pursue perfection. Because in fact, perfection is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Thank you. So with that, I get the last word, which is kind of cool. And it's about that time. Thank you all very much. I hope to see you over the course of my 2 days here. Have a blessed day.